This is Pivot Perspectives with Chris O'Byrne, the show that takes you around the world to share interviews with some of the most successful and relevant people on the planet. Hear their stories and get the most important business lessons they've learned on their road to success, and get exclusive access on how to implement their success into your life and business. Pivot Perspectives is brought to you by the Strategic Advisor Board and your host, Chris O'Byrne.
Sherry Winn, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Chris. I always loved talking to people who are self-aware and thought-provoking, so I'm so eager to join you this morning.
Well, let's start with a nice thought-provoking question then. What is a defining moment in your life that helped shape who you became today?
Oh, wow. I mean, there's so many, right? I mean, we get these opportunities to meet contrast in a variety of ways throughout our life. But I think that, looking back, there was a moment in 1988, the Olympic Games, where my coach was sexually harassing me. And he had done that to some other players before. When the players went forth to tell the federation about it, they cut the players from the team. So they made sure that they eliminated those people, along with the assistant coach who went to support them. And so here I am at the Olympic Games, and this guy is coming on to me and saying things to me that are not okay. I got trapped within an elevator, and he grabbed me and kissed me, and he was fondling me, and I was just, so these things were going on. So you can imagine, it's the Olympic Games. This is the biggest event up until that point of my life, right? And I really hadn't loved myself much at that time, right? And so here's this guy doing this, and I knew if I reported him that I wouldn't get to play at the end. I knew this would happen. I also knew I was supposed to be his assistant after the Olympics. I was going to be the assistant national team coach. I also knew that if I stood up to him, that would not happen either. And I made the decision to do it because it was wrong, and he shouldn't be getting away with it. And it was a power play. So if nobody's ever been in a power play where you don't feel like you have the right to say no, like it's different. If it's another situation, you have the right to say no, right? I mean, but in this situation, I didn't feel like I had the right to say no. And when I did, all the things that I thought would happen did happen.
Oh, no.
And it was probably the biggest gift I ever gave to myself, because I said, you're worthy, and you're worth being treated right. You're worth being loved. You're worth being heard. You're worth being valued. So that was a defining moment. I mean, even though it wasn't like I didn't just go boom and slide through that. It was months of devastation and learning more and more about how to love myself and how to honor myself. But it was a very big moment. It was that moment of moments, right?
What did you feel like when you actually did it? Because once you do it, thinking about it's one thing, but actually doing it, then the die is cast.
Well, it wasn't a very pretty way to do it.
Tell me about that.
Oh, wow. We were the first thing that happened was we were on a bus, and we're in the Olympic Games. You don't just get to practice right there at the Olympic Village. They literally put you on buses, which is a long process, right? They have to make sure you have your IDs. They check out of the bus. They have to get the helicopters to take you someplace. They have to get the cars in front of you and behind you to make sure the security guards. And so it's a really long process to board and to get someplace. And we had to travel like an hour and a half to our training facility. And so I had dropped a knee pad, and my coach had picked it up, and he wouldn't give it back to me, and so everybody else got off the bus, and he said, stay. And so I did. So he grabbed me again. He grabbed me again. I kissed me again. And he says, I think about you naked all night. He was from Hungary. And I was like, screw you, buddy. And I kind of shoved him and got out of the bus. I said, I don't want my knee pad. I don't care. Well, then he didn't play me in the first half of the scrimmage. And so I was like, you son of a gun. So he sent a player over, one of our teammates over, and said, hey, coach wants to talk to you. And I said, tell him to F off. She goes, you don't really want me to say that? And I go, oh yeah, that's exactly what I want you to say. So that was kind of the beginning of it. And it wasn't like the best way to do it. By the time, when I was young and I didn't have I didn't have the skill set. I didn't know how to express myself in a way. I didn't know how to handle those situations. So that was kind of the beginning of it. And it was, I mean, it was freeing at the moment. But it was also one of the things that they said later on when they fired me. They said, well, you didn't, what did they say? Something about the way that I was insubordinate. I was insubordinate. And so they couldn't hire me. I was insubordinate as an athlete. And I was like, yeah, because he was like messing with me. So, a lot better ways to handle that. But it was freeing for a second.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So then how long did the process take before you were
Oh.
finally booted out?
Well, it was months because, I got to play in the first few games, and then the last game of the Olympics, they actually kept me in the locker room, and they had like three guys that barricaded the door and wouldn't let me through. And so then after that, I knew, when I got back to the Olympic Training Center, it was just a couple of days where they said, we're releasing you from your contract and you're not going to get to be the assistant coach. And the reason for that is insubordination. And so then I went through, I tried to tell people about this. Like, I remember this is 1988. So women at that time,
Yeah.
their voices weren't heard. It wasn't a big deal. The Me Too movement hadn't happened, and so, I went to many, many, many different people in the Olympic Committee, and nobody cared. I mean, they were just like, brush me off because they didn't want negativity. So I went to, actually got a lawyer and went to the Civil Rights Center, and they go, oh, well, most of the time when we just bring people in, like this is resolved without going to court. When they came in, they went after me. And hey, I was not squeaky clean. I did many things like, probably drinking, yelling back at coaches. So I did some things, right? Because I was a little bit belligerent, but also, at that time there were many things that were going on that were wrong, and I didn't have the skill set to have the conversation. Right? I would just blow up. I was very passive aggressive. So they just got basically threatened me, Chris. They threatened me, and so, the civil rights person said, you're out. Like, we're not going to do this. This is not how litigation goes. And so then it was up to a lawsuit, and I just didn't have the money. I mean, I was broke,
Mm,
but I held on long enough for them to kick him out of the country. Like the federation basically said, you can't come back. Like
huh.
you've got too much going on. You can't come back. And so I had done something which I felt like was positive. And so that was the point that I said, okay, I've done something that was positive and I can let go of this. But the actual like forgiving part, ooh,
Mm,
right, Chris, because we talk about forgiveness. It's like, it's not just I forgive you. It's the depth of feeling it, like really connecting to it. And so there was like, I had to forgive my teammates. I needed to forgive my coach. I needed to forgive the federation. I needed to forgive myself.
yeah.
And then my higher power. And when I say that to people, they're like, well, I don't blame God or the universe or whatever. I'm like, well, anytime you say something like, well, why did this happen to me? Or this shouldn't happen to me, that's you're blaming your higher power, right? So that forgiveness was lengthy because I didn't know how to. And I wasn't ready to, right? Let's be serious. Like I wasn't ready to forgive everybody. And I wasn't ready to forgive, whatever part I played in it. So that was very lengthy. Because it took a lot of self-awareness and a lot of growth to get to the point where that became something that I understood and something I could do. And I would say that took years. I would say years, maybe 10 years, maybe, because I just didn't know. I
Oh
didn't know
yeah.
it, right? And so now I understand what that means and how to do it, but I didn't then.
Well, this is a good place to ask you then about that process because so many people go through that. They know they need to forgive.
Hmm.
They've been told it and they're like, yeah, I get it. I
Hmm.
understand. I need to, but
Hmm.
it's all very surface level and they have no clue. It's like I just don't know how.
Yeah.
So how does someone go about figuring out and eventually forgiving those people who did that harm to them?
Well, what helped me first of all was understand that it wasn't hurting them, right? That we think we hold on to something because we think by holding on to it we're going to affect change. I mean, there's a lot of reasons we hold on to things. Like if I let go of this, the justice won't be served. If I let go of this, they'll get away with it. If I let go of this, it says it's okay, they did it. I mean, there's so many, like, we have to look at the reasons why we hold on to it. And I think once I understood, like, look, I'm holding on to this for ridiculous reasons. Like, none of that's true. If I hold on to it, it doesn't mean that they're going to be punished. And if I let go of it, and I think that's part of it. I think part of it is understanding, like, you have to come to some understanding about that it's not condoning the behavior, it's just letting it go. Like, and believing too that justice will be served. And what I mean by that, like, you can say, if you're biblical, you reap what you sow, or you can say karma, that that it all happens to all of us. And so it's not my responsibility to cause harm to that person. It's more like when somebody does something and karma comes, or whatever you want to call it, it's a lesson for that person. It's not, hey, I'm going to punish you. It's about lessons. And so when we look at people and we start having more empathy toward them, and we start having empathy toward ourselves, we understand that there's many things that we do that are not really cool. They're not good. And if we understand that it's an opportunity for growth and it's an opportunity to learn, and that we're forgiven, and that everybody, without exception, gets that same love, then I think it starts easier to let go of it and to understand, like, I'm not really, holding on, this hurts me. It doesn't hurt them. So I think all of that is the process, right? All of that kind of belief system for me had to line up before I could get to the depth of understanding how to let go. And once I did, like, I don't have any angst or anger toward any of those people. They're just people traveling through this journey, and they're all on this journey to learn and to grow. And part of that growth is from having experiences. And those experiences give us the opportunity for greater joy, greater love, greater understanding, humility, compassion, all those things. So if I look at it differently, so this is a thought process. Like, this is all a belief system for me that had to come into play before I could truly get to forgiveness.
Yes, I agree. I like that. That's a good explanation. And kind of the way I look at it too is, if there's this person here who is being a real jerk and he's doing something terrible to me, and I want him to get it. And I have to realize I have a small role to play. So yes, that person has a lesson. This is about a lesson. It's not just they're a jerk and they're doing this to hurt you. Even if they are,
Right.
it's still they're going through this growth, pattern. This
Yeah.
growth in their life. This is one of those lessons, and I have my role. But my role, even though I want part of my role in their lesson to be the one that nails them and makes sure that they pay, I have to realize most of the time that isn't the role I get to play.
Yeah.
That belongs to someone or something else.
Right.
But boy, that letting go, I still struggle with that. There are still times where, yes, but.
Yeah. And the shift, and when you're saying that, Chris, reminded me of the shift of they're doing it, they're not doing it to me, they're doing it for me. And so that greater shift of
Yeah.
understanding that, like, when I look back at those things that have happened in my life, in what ways did I grow from it? In what ways did I evolve from it? Now, look, you can get better or you can get bitter. And there's a lot of people who choose bitterness. And I was certainly one of those early on. Um, but when I look back, I think, oh my gosh, like, all the ways that those situations helped me evolve, helped me become a better individual. I can understand then maybe it wasn't done to me. It was really done with this greater concept or idea that I had the opportunity to really view my life and to say, there were things I was doing. They were not pretty. They were not kind. They were not in the better interest of myself nor other human beings. And all of that caused me to change, right? To line up differently. So was it done to me or for me? Well, man, it feels like it was done for me rather than to me. But that's a shift that you have to take inside yourself, right? Because otherwise we can go, oh, this old son of a gun, he was that. And we can do that. Or we can have a different mindset around it. And that shift just causes you to have greater self-love and greater joy and serenity and peace. So it's a choice that you make. The way that you view it is a choice that you make. And I just didn't know I had the choice early.
Yeah. Yeah, we're slow to realize that one. So
Yes.
Let's talk about your journey to becoming a two-time Olympian, because
Mhm.
that's pretty impressive, let's face it.
Mhm.
Um, when did you first realize that that was your dream, that you were going to go for that?
Mhm.
And then what was the process like of achieving that? And what was what was your sport?
Great. So I love the question. Thank you. And you find that people that live, that live their dreams actually had a dream a long time ago, right? So I was age of 7. I can remember exactly the moment. I was playing in the back of the house. I heard all this commotion go on in the living room, all this loud noise of cheering. And so I run in there to see what's going on. And our black and white television is tuned to the 1968 Olympic Games in Mexico. And my parents and grandparents are sitting there and they're like screaming, USA, USA. I'm like, I'm going to do that. Right? Who wouldn't want their parents to adore you? Who wouldn't want to be on TV? Right? I mean, that kind of that general feeling, but I meant it. Like I was like, okay. And literally, I don't know if you remember Jack LaLanne, but he was the fitness guru back in that time, right? I mean, the next morning, me and Jack LaLanne, we're working out. I'm doing jumping jacks. I'm doing like I started training the very next day with me and Jack LaLanne, and I was serious though. I mean that feeling of watching my parents, my grandparents, right? The way that they adored what was going on and the way they were excited about it. I was like, man, that's what I want to feel. I want to feel that. And so it was born at like age 7. I just always had that dream. And so I was literally training as best I knew how from a very young age. And then I got more serious. I started training twice a day. Like I was always the first one at school. I was in the gym at 7 a.m. before school started to get a little workout in before school. Then I'd work out with the team. Then I'd work out after. I went back on Saturdays and Sundays. And so, um, my dream was to play basketball because that's the sport I knew. My mom was a basketball coach. My dad had been a basketball coach.
Oh,
So I was around it. It's the only sport I knew. And, back when I grew up, there wasn't a lot of sports. Like, let's be serious. You didn't get to watch women on TV. You didn't see, like, the Olympics didn't have, women's sports weren't on the Olympics as much. Um, but I didn't let that stop me. I just kept thinking it was going to happen. And then basketball didn't work out. So long story around that. Another great learning opportunity, another lot of forgiveness opportunities. And I was shoved into this opportunity to learn the sport called team handball, which is like soccer using the hands or water polo on land. And it was a club sport at Texas A&M. A classmate said you should do this. I go, I don't even know what racquetball is. And she goes, no, it's not that. It's a different sport. Just come watch. And I loved it because it was fast paced. There's a lot of goal scores and there was contact allowed, which I was like all into punishing people, right? So defensively, you got to hit people. I was like, oh, this is great. I get to hit people. And so I just started kind of playing with the club team. I didn't know what I was doing. I literally had no clue. I was just, going hard and fast because that's all I wanted to do. Then they said, hey, we're going to go to New York City to the national tournament. Do you want to go? Sure. Like national, like I'd not been to New York City. It sounded like fun to me. I didn't know what I was doing. I mean, I'm still just running around, hitting people and throwing the ball as hard as I could. And at the end of that, the national team coach at that time said, hey, we want you to move to New Jersey with us and train. I go, okay. So that's how I got into it. I moved to New Jersey with the national team and started training. I didn't know what I was doing. Started training. And so that was about 3.5 years before the 1984 Olympic Games. So we lived together and trained together for those 3.5 years. And of course, then I was addicted to it. I was addicted to the travel. I was addicted to, the teammates. I was addicted to the training. And so we were able to do that in 1984. Then I came back again for 88.
awesome. That's what an experience for somebody, and at such a young age.
Mhm.
So a lot more defining moments in there. What what is like a big lesson that you learned in that process of training to
Mhm.
be an Olympian?
Well, the funny, like, here's why I became an Olympian is because I had this incredible, I was born with like my specific gift I was given was this incredible drive, motivation, persistence, determination. That's what I got. Like athletically, sure, I was good. There was probably a lot better people than me, but I just had that. That was my gift. Then at the same time, which I didn't recognize, Chris, and looking back now, I see it, why it was so hard for me and why I had so many obstacles along the pathway is at the same time, I had this limiting belief that my family gave to me. Oh, unknowingly. Like when we get beliefs from our family, we accept them because we don't know better, and our family has them because they don't know better. And so looking back, I now realize that my struggle, the reason it was so difficult was that I didn't have enough self-worth. Like I had a lot of self-doubt, and that came from my family. They didn't mean to give it to me. Like that was not their intent. But looking backward and all the little messages, like I'll give you an example. So I was talking to my mom recently. So she's 85, right? And I go to see her and she goes, I want to give you $2,000. I said, Mom, I'm golden. Like, I don't need your money. Thank you. And she goes, no, you need it. And I go, what? And she goes, you need to go get your teeth whitened because you shouldn't be on stage with that color of teeth.
Oh my.
So,
Wow.
yeah. So the message is you're not good enough, and I was like, wow, at the moment I go, huh. And I started thinking about all those messages that I had received over the years from them unintentionally. Like we didn't mean to do it, but those little messages that I got that said you're unworthy. And so, even though I was, a good athlete, I was always looking through the lens of unworthiness. And when you're doing that, there's a lot of push and pull, which made that journey a lot harder than it needed to be. Like it made it a lot more emotional than it needed to be. But I'm thankful that I made it anyway, right? If you've got something like that that's pulling at you and tugging at you all the time and you're living in fear, it's a lot different than if you know that you're worthy, that you have that self-love. So, I feel so incredibly fortunate that somehow, even though having that belief, I had a belief that, if you work hard enough and you persist long enough that you'll make it. So I had these opposing beliefs. So that push and pull was a lot harder. And if I could have eliminated those other ones, would have been like the road would have been smoother. So I'm very lucky. Like I feel like, oh my gosh, how lucky am I that I still, even with all that self-doubt and all that underlying angst that I had and anxiety about my worthiness, I was able to make it.
Was that feeling of unworthiness part of what pushed you so hard?
Probably. I would say probably. That's a good observation, Chris. And I would also say like that drive of perfectionism, right? Which is also comes from fear. So there's a piece of it that comes from fear, definitely. I also think that if it came from love, it'd been a lot easier instead of fear.
Yes.
But that's the only way. That's the only way I knew, right? So from fear, it doesn't take far to get into anger. And so when I was angry, then I played better,
Yeah.
right? Because that anger is such a strong emotion, it quietens all the self-doubt. So if I could get angry enough, I could play really well.
When in your personal development did you finally let go of that anger?
Oh. So I developed chronic pain at age 35, and chronic pain was couldn't sit, stand, or walk without pain. So I couldn't walk through a grocery store long enough to buy groceries. It was just too painful. I couldn't sit in a movie theater to watch a movie without being in pain. The only place I could find relief was like really when I could lay on a couch, right? If I was lying down, I was okay. So I could sleep. So that was good. But I couldn't do anything else. Like sit, standing, and walking was just unbearable. And I went to 17 different medical professionals, had every test known to mankind, like every test. And they're like, we don't know. We don't know what it is. And the last guy I saw, he said, we're going to look at all your tests. We're going to come up with a game plan. I'm like, perfect, game plan. Yay. So by this time, because I'm a basketball coach, and so I go back and he says, okay, we're going to send you to a pain management clinic. I'm like, dude, I don't want to manage it. I want to get rid of it. Like, we're not even talking the same language. So he actually got mad at me because I said, I'm not doing that. And I turned to walk out and he goes, you're going to regret this and you need to do this. And I was like, no. So that started my journey in looking into alternative medicine. Right. And, so, because I was going to figure out a way to get rid of this. I was not going to live like this. I couldn't live like this. I wasn't really living. And, I hit upon this specific type of alternative medicine. And they said, look, the body, mind, and spirit are all the same. And I said, well, that's BS. I'm like, what are you talking? It's physical. What are you talking about? The mind, the spirit. And so, but, at this time, at this point, I'm desperate. And so I'm like, oh, let's give it a shot because I'm desperate. And I got a little bit better. I'm like, whoa, 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 whoa. There's something to this. And so their whole thing was like, we want to deal with these trapped emotions, all these things that you've been stuffing for years. And I was like, whatever. Um, but what I discovered was, as I release these things, like this is for forgiveness, right? As I release these things, as I started letting go of these things, I got better and better and better. So, and it wasn't a simple process because I'm pretty stubborn. It took years. Um, but I was trapped into, I wasn't trapped. It was, I would get better and I was like, okay, I'm better, and nothing else, nothing. I mean, I'm talking about, I went to chiropractic, I went to like massage therapy, I went to Reiki, I mean, like nothing had got me better.
Wow.
Nothing. And so it's like, well, if it's going to be better, I got to keep doing it. And that's where
What was it, by the way?
it's called integrative manual therapy is what it was called. Integrative manual therapy.
Oh, okay.
And they really look at the body, mind, and spirit, and they work on all three pieces. And of course, I didn't want to talk about any of this, like, because to me, talking about any of the things that caused me pain just meant I was reliving the pain. I didn't want to do that, right? I thought if I had just stuffed it, then they were gone. Like if I could just stuff everything, it's gone. Well, it's not. It's in you, right? And the more that you stuff emotions, the more that it caused greater pain. My body had just had enough. It's like, you can't stuff another thing. So it was a long process. And that's where I learned about, forgiveness and letting go of some of these things. And, it's where I really started studying the mind and the body and the spirit more. I mean, that's where I started reading tons of books and, really doing a lot of self-awareness and questioning and recognizing things that that were harmful to me. And it was quite a process. Like, I don't think everybody has to go through the lengthy process that I had to go through.
Yeah, yeah. I can see you being stubborn enough to make that a long process.
There goes your determination, right? Persistent. But I mean, several times the therapist told me later, they go, when you would walk out, we thought we'd never see you again, because you were just so like resistant, and we try to talk and you'd just be like, "Ugh." And they go, yeah, you'd come back. And I go, yeah, yeah. Because I really wanted to be healthy. And so that, sometimes you get those lessons that are very difficult and
Yeah.
challenging. And I look back and I'm like, man, why was it so hard to talk about the things that had hurt me deeply? Why was that so hard? But if you've been practicing, right, not talking about it and not letting even yourself feel it, then that's all you knew. That's all I knew, you know. And that's something else I learned from my parents. Like looking back now, which is really
Yeah.
cool. When you get to a place when you can observe with curiosity, that means you're no longer mixed in the emotions of things, right? And so I'm able to now just observe them. I'm like, wow. So we never talked about an emotion. We never talked about anything that disturbed us. We never did any of that, And I was like, oh, so I learned it, not mad at them, learned it, and I did it really well until it didn't work anymore. And then now I'm just like, yeah, I don't know why I'm so like, it was so hard. It was just so hard to talk about emotions.
And and it does seem to be very generational. That generation, we're pretty close to the same generation. We're both boomers,
Hmm.
around the tail end, but our parents were new into all of that. It was,
Yeah.
they grew up when the war was ending.
Hmm.
It was like a completely different world at that point because everything you're saying, it's like, oh wow, this is pretty much my life.
Yeah.
Um,
They didn't know better, right, Chris? And
even
that's why I don't
yeah.
fault them. They didn't know better. They were just doing what they knew.
Yeah, yep, exactly. And that took me a long time to again find forgiveness
Yep.
to see it. And a lot of it was it was just learning how to see things
Hmm.
with I like to think of it as more realistic, more of
Hmm.
viewing reality as it is.
Yeah.
Um, but even I remember watching my mom work out to Jack LaLanne and trying to go along with it. I remember when we got our first color television.
Yeah.
Again, it was such a different world.
Yep. Yep.
So, so you got out of the Olympics and
Mhm.
out of that, and
Mhm.
did you go into basketball coaching at that point?
Mhm. I did. And so, because I really wanted to coach, I'd always wanted to coach. It was something I had, there were certain things I wanted to do. I wanted to be an athlete. I wanted to be Olympian. I wanted to coach. And then I wanted to be an author. I wanted to write books. And so, so I went into coaching, and because there was nowhere to coach handball except to go to Europe, and then you had to convince them that I knew how to coach. So I started basketball coaching, and I did that for 23 years in the college level, and then I quit to go into what I thought was going to be really easy,
Ah,
like motivational speaking. And then I learned, I had to get a coach for speaking, I had to get a coach for business, and I learned that I needed to write some books so people would take me seriously. And another evolution. I mean, that I loved all the years that I loved them. And then the new chapter, right, was learning all these things about. And when I started, got out of coaching, and it's like, well, you have to really be some sort of motivational speaker. You just can't like blah, blah. And so leadership, to really help people, leaders. And so I got into, leadership training, coaching, consulting. And so people say, well, what do you know about leadership? Well, that's what, coaching was, is leading teams, leading teams to winning, right? And evolving those people to certain levels, and winning cultures. You can't win without a winning culture. So that's how that evolved, Chris. And then the interesting thing is, that we kind of go back to all this history of me and all the forgiveness. Also, when I talk to coaches, when I'm coaching coaches, coaching leaders, CEOs or whatever, this is the thing, is they all have this underlying limiting beliefs, or they all have these underlying stories that are stopping them from being their best. And so part of it, yes, I can coach, like, how do you delegate more? Sure. I can tell you the 9 steps of delegation. And why aren't you? What's the fear behind it? Right? Because just knowing something, like knowing steps, but you got to know why you're actually not doing it. And you got to resolve that piece to use the other pieces. And that's where all that other comes in, right? All that, the books that I read and the years that I went through all this different therapy. And that's where all that comes into play.
what are 1 or 2 techniques you learned from coaching basketball that you then used when you were coaching leaders?
Well, repetition is one. Repeat, repeat, repeat. Patience with that. Understanding that you can't just give somebody something and then it's done. So one of the things that I do that a lot of other coaches don't do is, when I give, we have a conversation with one of my clients, then I give them what I call winning success steps. So these are deeper reflection steps for them to go deeper into the thought process and self-awareness, because self-awareness is the only pathway to transformation, which is also what I knew from coaching ball. So, the biggest opponent you're ever going to face is yourself. And that doesn't mean necessarily the skills you have on the court. It's the things that are going on in your head. And so we did a lot of things with that, with my team as well. So all those really translated. I mean, it translated to, we have many, many sessions with my players, and I would say, write down the top 10 things that you need to improve on. And they're like, I said, okay, write down the top 10 things you do well. Well, isn't that true of most people today, right? I mean, so all these kind of things that I did that were off the court things with the players translate now, and some of the on the court, let's repeat, let's refine, let's go back and look at it again. What else do we need to learn? What other ways can I say this or do this that will help you learn this? So all that translates, yeah.
What caused you to give up coaching to become a speaker and consultant?
Yeah. Well, I think the evolution of myself, right? So as I was constantly changing, and the athletics is about competition, 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 right? And I was more concerned about the growth of the people than winning. Well, you can't, and so that meant that every single player was essential to me, and every single player was very important, and their growth was very important. And so I was more interested in how can I help these people grow than I was about winning the games. And when that transition happened, I'm like, ooh, not a good thing if you want to be a coach and you want to win. Like, you got to think about, it's more cutthroat than that. And I was evolving to where I wanted to help people more. I wanted to support people more, and give them some of the techniques and things I had learned over the years. And it just wasn't like, I could have probably stayed in coaching and done that, but it didn't feel right anymore. So I wanted to give more to more people.
So what Who is the person you love to work with most when you are doing your coaching, consulting? And do you define yourself as more of a coach or more of a consultant or just a blend of the two?
Say a blend of the two. So, um, consulting goes into businesses, right? And we can see what's going on with your business and we can help you get that business on track, which to me is also about coaching. Because when you go into business, what I'm looking for is I'm looking for your people who are hurting your business, right? And so then we discover those people and this, how can we get them on track and what kind of methods can we use to move those people forward and to make sure they're consistently on track. So coaching is diving deeper into those pieces of, um, you know, why are you who you are, right? What's going on with you? There's this that's keeping you here. So when we get stuck, and this is, all of us get stuck. When we get stuck, what's keeping us stuck? What's keeping us in that inability to move forward, to expand? So I do both, and I love both. It's a great joy to do that, and I just, to me, anytime that somebody gets an aha moment, epiphany, Chris, it's a win. Like that's my new win, right? And to see them, and here's why it's so important to me, is not only for their life, but it's a multiplier effect, especially if it's leaders. This is why I love working with leaders, because now it's just a multiplier effect. It goes from them to their team members. From their team members, they take it home, and from the home, they move it to the community. So think about the number of layers that one leader can impact when they change, and how that impacts the world.
Let's shift into your books.
Mhm.
You, was it one of your coaches, or did you just know that you needed to write some books to gain the credibility and authority?
Um, well, I always wanted to write a book, and then I didn't think I could write a book. And then
Mm.
went to it was a marketing seminar, and I knew I could speak. Like I know I can get on stage, and I can get into the emotions of people, and I can cause people to think deeply from the stage. What I didn't know was how to get on stages, because that's the marketing piece, right? And
Ah.
so the first guy that I went to listen to, he talked about the importance of having a book. And I thought, well, this will take years, blah, blah, blah. And I started reading the books that other people had, and I was like, oh my gosh, they're terrible. Like they're really like, they're not even books, they're booklets. And I started looking at the writing, I go, oh my gosh, I'm better than that. I can do that, right? And so that's what started that. And then the most recent book that I wrote was from a coach that I had who said, you need to get people to see you differently because they're seeing you as a basketball coach. And so you need to get them to see you differently. And so I interviewed 200 leaders from
Oh,
all over the United
wow.
States. And I'm talking about CEOs like, the former CEO of Blue Cross Blue Shield, the former CEO of FedEx, the current SVP of Dell, I had all these wonderful people from like, multi-billion to down to mom and pop businesses. And the great thing about this, Chris, is I'm listening to them. I'm like, this is stuff I know. This is stuff I practice. And so not to say that I didn't get some great tips and stuff like that and I didn't learn, I did, but it also reinforced that I really knew what I was talking about. Right.
Yeah.
So that reinforced it. And so writing the book, the last book was complete joy. It was joy from the perspective of interviewing the people and getting to meet these people, having great conversations with them, to writing the book that I think is a phenomenal book to help people because it comes from the point, always from the point of how the self-awareness evolves your leadership. That's really what it does.
So, okay. So 10 years ago, you wrote Unleash the Winner Within.
Mhm.
What lessons did you learn from that process that you then did differently? What did you do differently with your latest book?
So the latest book, it had, it wasn't just talking about me. So a lot of the first thing in the first book was just a lot about me, right? My experiences, my knowledge. So now the ability to make a point and then you tell a story from somebody that has had incredible success in leadership, right? You wrap that point into, their story into the point. So it makes sense to people. And then to also bring, the coaching aspect into the book too. So to show how having conversations with people around this very thing shifted their perspective and enabled them to have some extraordinary result. And so the book was written differently. And then every every title, like every chapter title was heavily thought about in terms of making sure it's positive, making sure it was going toward the direction of somebody, thinking positively. Every subtitle was the same thing. There's a lot of thought process into that. So it was totally different in the way that I wrote it, and therefore I love the book. I love the process of the book, and I love the people who shared their insights with me into the book.
So on your previous book, what did you do for marketing the book that worked?
Well, it's kind of the same thing, right now, Chris, is I use that book in kind of the same way as the current book. I use that book to, when I went to go speak, I get on a stage, that was extra income, right? And it helped me get the gig. And when it helps get the gig, it helps people see you as an expert, and then you sell that book. And so I sell the book on webinars. I sell the book when I do speaking gigs. Um, and so, in terms of really hard marketing, I haven't done a lot of hard marketing on either the book. They're more to prove that I'm an expert and to share that expertise with people after I talk to them.
Okay. So do you keep, and I'm always curious if authors do this, do you keep track of the data? Do you do more of a, take more of an analytical approach of this is where I promoted the book, this is the return on investment I've seen, this is how many leads the book has generated for my business. Do you do any of those things?
I really don't. I should. Like, that's probably something that would help me grow my business. So I should do that. There were just so many things that, a one person gig. I have a team of consultants that can help me when I get into something, but I'm really a one person gig. And so just trying to keep up with everything I'm doing. Right. So if you're doing
Hmm.
speaking gigs, if you're doing webinars, if you're doing, coaching, and I mean, like, I was just trying to, like, can I keep my head above water? And so fortunately, just recently I hired a full-time assistant, which has been the best thing, right? I mean, how many times I tell people that they needed one and I didn't do it? It's been the best thing that opens up the door to doing more things that I wasn't able to do before, right? And so now it's about, okay, how can I go back and do some things better, right? Use the book to more of my advantage because it is a good book, and then people who read it say it's a great book, right? So how do I do that now that I'm not stuck into, like that, the quadrant in Stephen Covey's, like, urgent, important, survival quadrant? I probably lived in that, just trying to get everything done. So now that I have
Hmm.
freedom, how do I use my time better?
I like that. You interviewed a lot of people for this latest book. Did any of those interviews then turn into other opportunities?
Oh yeah, absolutely. There's been opportunities in three ways. One way has been I have some people that I've created lifelong friends with, which has been amazing. So it's a sharing of information. So I have some people that I speak to once a month, and we just share information. I mean, we just get, if I'm like stuck on something and I can call them and say, hey, what would you do here? So we share information and we just share time, and it's been wonderful people. Like, they're the kind of people, tribe that you want, right? It's that tribe that you want. So that's one way that it's been marvelous. I've gotten some speaking opportunities from that. So as well, some people that have hired me to come in to speak for them. And then I've gotten some webinar opportunities from that, and some coaching clients. So it's in a lot of different ways. It's evolved in a lot of different ways. And some of those are just, one and dones, which is great. I don't, that's wonderful. You gave me great information. Thank you so much. Some of them have evolved into other friendships. And so um, it's been an incredible, like, it's not just the writing, but the incredible connection with some of these people,
Yeah.
right? And some of them were easy connections. They're like, hey, really would love to keep you in my tribe. Can we talk? Like, next month? Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Some of that just, it was so easy to evolve into, and then the sharing of materials back and forth, right? With that, some of it's a little bit more difficult, like on my end, just to keep up with these people, like to say, hey, how you doing? Tell me what's going on in your world, like that kind of thing.
Yeah.
That's a little more
Yeah.
challenging. But I'm really good at that because that's what I do with my friends.
Yeah. 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 We all have friends and family who they love us. They want us to be involved, but they're never the ones that
Yeah.
kind of volunteer that information up front. But they want to be asked.
Yep.
So I get that.
Yeah.
So for some, this is really good advice for somebody who wants to write a book, but they don't necessarily feel confident in what they have learned and what they can provide and give value. They can simply interview a bunch of people
Mhm.
who are related
Mhm.
to this topic, and then they're going to, in most cases, they're going to experience those other benefits.
Yep.
So, not doing it just because you think you're going to get business, but because
Yep.
you want to establish some better relationships
Well, I think that helps you.
with
One is
people.
it gives you more of an expert, right? So if I say to people, I've interviewed 200 people, leaders, then, that gives me credibility. That gives you credibility. So I'm not saying that you're not an expert in what you do, but if you interview a certain number of people, it makes you more of an expert, correct? I mean, that's one of the things it does for you. Um, and you just get to meet these wonderful people. Like, wow, some of these incredible people that I've gotten to meet, there's no way I would have ever met them, ever, if I didn't have that opportunity. And then, it can evolve into something else. But I think that the first thing is just to look for those. When I talk to somebody, I'm literally thrilled to everybody that I get to speak with. And I just feel like I'm so grateful for that alone, like that information they're sharing with me. There could be other opportunities, but I think that if you go into it with that belief system, I think you're going to fail, because then it feels like you're using the person rather than, really just sharing time with them. And I don't know how many people have said to me at the end of an interview, like, "Oh my gosh, this was a lot more fun than I ever thought it was going to be."
Yeah, yeah, I get that on these interviews too, because I reach out to people on LinkedIn, and you're like, you never know, because you get all sorts of people on LinkedIn that are just offering you everything, and they're all about take, take, take.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so one last question related to that, and that is, what is a good way to connect with these people to get those interviews in the first place?
Well, we use LinkedIn. And so if you just don't go on and say, "Hey, I want to interview you." You got to establish a relationship. And I think that's what people, like you said on LinkedIn, a lot of people are just jumping out. So you have to do a little bit of work to get to that place before you can ask. And so that's the time commitment of doing that, right? Because it's not just like, "Oh, we're going to interview a bunch of people and they all say yes." It never happens that way. It's creating a relationship, then the ask of something that's really cool for them too. They get to be interviewed, they get to share their knowledge and their wisdom,
Yeah,
to be in a book. So it's something that it's kind of a gift, that even in the ask, it's a gift, right? And so,
yeah,
and then of course I always send them an email, a thank you email. I always send a handwritten note. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I always offer any support that I can, if there's any way I can ever support you, don't hesitate to ask. And I mean all of that. I literally mean it. And I am happy to give, because of the gift they gave to me. So I think it's the way you do it. Like, it really has to be from your heart centered versus, like, I want to gift you this versus give me this. And if you're in the, give me, give me, give me, you're not going to get the gifts that,
people pick up on that.
yeah.
What So then what kinds, so establishing that relationship to begin with, I mean, that also is something that people don't really quite know how to do.
Yeah.
What kinds of things do you ask or say in those initial emails or messages where you're building the relationship?
I always say something about, I would like to connect with Olympic level leaders. So that kind of gets somebody, that kind of gets somebody and they go, "Olympic level leader, why would you say that?" And then I would say, as a two-time Olympian, here's some of the things that, I've learned, in terms of unprecedented success. I'd really love to continue learning to keep that Olympic level mindset. And I would love to, connect with you. And so it's more of a, like, do I get to use my Olympics? Yes. So somebody else might not have that, but I'm certain you have something that people would want to connect, a reason why they would want to connect with you. Right.
Yeah. And I mean, there are so many ways to do it authentically. And even if somebody wants to use that language, Olympic level, and then they're like, well, I learned from somebody who was a two-time Olympian,
Yeah.
that this. And so you don't even necessarily have to be at that level because, yeah, you're right. Most of us are going to be like, well, what do I have to offer? What have I done?
Yeah.
And, um, but you can, until you get to that level of confidence,
Yep.
you can leverage other people in a sense because you're sharing what you've learned from them. And there is something authentic about that. And a level of humility of like, well, you know, and then the way you're presenting. And again, where your heart is at when you are writing these emails, when you're establishing these relationships, that the energy that comes from that
Yep.
overrides just about any dumb thing you think you might be saying.
Yeah, agreed. Your intention behind that has got to be in the right space, right? Like
Yeah.
your intention in the conversation. Like if it's a conversation and that's it, I'm happy. Like I'm thrilled, especially when somebody says, "Wow, this is so much more fun than I could have ever thought it was going to be." Cool.
Hmm.
Like I just gave them an hour of joy. What a great gift, right? So, you have to switch that kind of thing about I really want to give versus I want to get. You gotta switch that in your head.
Yeah. Yeah. Really switch it. Not just I'm going to switch it and talk that way because I want to get this.
Oh, no,
Yeah.
it's
People.
gotta be that deeper, like we talked about before. How do you get to deeper levels? Well, it's really that work that you have to do, that deeper work.
Yeah. 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 You've, oh man, so much goes back to that. And that would be a good conversation for another time to just go deeper into that one piece
Yeah,
right there.
yeah.
Um, which makes me think, yeah, maybe we should schedule another talk about that
Love
specifically,
to.
because I know you have tons to share. We didn't, I mean, we like barely skimmed over the kinds of things that you actually help people with,
Yep.
and this would be a good way to go deeper into that.
Right.
So, wrapping things up, what are some words of wisdom that you can share with people?
Well, so the whole first chapter in my book, the book "Winning Leadership: 7 Secrets to Being a Truly Powerful Leader," is what I call the winning factor. And what's the winning factor? The winning factor is the ability to be self-aware, right? And so I think the deeper that you learn about who you truly are, and to look at the things that are really your strengths and to love those and to honor those, and to also look at the things that are stopping you. What's stopping you? I mean, those are the pieces. When people are really good leaders, it's because they've done a lot of personal development. And they'll tell me that because in the last book, when I said to them, 80% of the people said this when I asked the question, what's the biggest challenge you've ever faced? 80% said myself,
And
right? And so they
the
know.
other 20 were wrong.
Yeah, yeah. The other 20 didn't know, um, or they heard the question. Or they heard the question differently. But that's the thing I would say. Like, continue to grow you, continue to work on you, and whatever way that looks like, whether that's a coach or a mentor, or if it's, just journaling, if it's meditation, if it's reading books, if it's listening to podcasts, like continue to grow you.
That's beautiful. And thank you for mentioning the book. I was going to mention the title earlier of your latest book, and but you kept saying so many other things that made me want to ask deeper questions about those that I forgot.
It's
But
okay.
I'll make sure the book and how do people reach you and all that are in the show notes and in the bio in the magazine as well. But where is the best place that you'd like to send people to learn more about you, your story, and what you offer?
So you can find me at www.thewinningleadershipcompany.com, thewinningleadershipcompany.com. You can find me there. It shows you, different testimonials that people have from having me in. It will give you all the speaking things that I talk about and workshops that I do, and then also the consulting. So you can find everything right there. But I'm really happy just to offer anybody a free discovery session with me. And so what that means, like if you're looking at this and you heard something that really kind of just triggered you, like, oh wow, that's forgiveness thing, or how do I learn how to do persistence, or how do I learn how to be a better leader? Any of those things. Happy to give anybody who listens a free 45-minute one-on-one call with me. And all you have to do is email me at Sherry, Sherry, at thewinningleadershipcompany.com. And everybody goes, oh, it's free. Like there's a catch. Of course there is. Here's a catch. You got to promise to rant and rave about me. If you will do that, it's free. And if you don't do that, well, so.
That's perfect. And that is anybody who is listening or reading this, I want them to understand that I almost never get people who are offering their time like that because we've been trained, make sure it's, You don't have to put the time in. It's something that people can just sign up to and get on your email list and go through the process there. So I want people to understand how extremely generous this is, especially 45 minutes. Holy cow.
Yep. Because I really want to help people, Chris. That's how you help them. You do it in 5 or 10. Like, this is not a money making scheme. This is about, hey, I want to help you get to where you want to be. And if you're tired of where you are, then this will give you at least 3, takeaways that you can take away and do something that can change your life. And that's something that brings me great joy.
That's beautiful. Sherry, thank you so much for coming on today.
Thank you so much, Chris, for the questions. I appreciate you.
You got it.
Thanks for listening to Pivot Perspectives with your host, Chris O'Byrne. Please leave your feedback and visit strategicadvisorboard.com to get the latest and greatest business advice on the planet. Follow us on social media for updates, and we will see you on the next episode.